Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 182, recording on Friday, July 10th, with the guest, Judd Zulgad, who you guys probably know from Purple Daily, slash Judd's Substack, which you can subscribe to. But Judd's been in the market forever, has covered this team and the NFC North for a long time, and is out at every training camp practice. So I thought, we're a couple weeks out. Why not talk about some Viking subjects with someone who just respect the way he's gone about it for a long time, and is always funny in how he perceives situations. So did this last year with them. Thought it'd be really fun to do it again, and hope you guys enjoy the show. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. You can also rate, review, give us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart. And we appreciate that. With that, let's hop right in to our conversation with Judd Zulgad. All right, Judd, welcome back to the show. It's been a minute. How are you? And how excited are you for training camp?
So, thank you. I'm good, and I am irrationally, as I always get, like right around now, excited for the start of training camp. But I can tell you, a week and a half into camp, I will be irrationally excited for a game. And then about a week and a half after that, I will be irrationally excited to get the preseason games done. So, it always works the same way. And no matter how much I tell my brain, okay, training camp gets to be sort of boring, I'm still, when it's about to start, especially with the quarterback controversy, I am always jacked. I don't know why. I'm too old. I've done this for too long to be this excited about it, but I'm excited about it.
Well, that was kind of my question. Is you've stood out. I mean, obviously, it used to be Mankato, what have you. You've done it so many times. What is it about training camp for you that keeps you as engaged as you always are? To tell viewers, listeners, and they probably know this because they listen to Purple Daily. You're out there with a notepad, jotting down kicks every single day, and I'm trying to watch it. I'm working on it, but it's impressive.
Well, thank you. What keeps me coming back is just, and I think it's a football thing, but it's a Vikings thing as well, right? And you're going into what, year 4 now?
Season 5.
Season 5
training camp.
Okay, so and look, I did this back in my day on the Packer beat. When you come in and miss training camp, it's not the same thing. When you start with training camp, it is a lot more like you're in the weeds. And what keeps me coming back with this team especially is there's always something, right? There's always something. It's not like this team has ever had, in my time covering them, a quarterback for, beyond Kirk. Let's say 5, 6, 7 years. You know who the quarterback's going to be. You just need to get him reps. There's always a storyline, and it doesn't matter if the coach is Mike Tice, if the coach is Brad Childress, Leslie Frazier, Mike Zimmer, Kevin O'Connell. So I think that's what keeps me coming back is this team is never boring. There are a lot of things. Not all of them are good, but they're never boring. And I think for our jobs, I'm serious about this. I think for our jobs, it is incredibly entertaining.
There's no question. I've written this over the course of these 4 years being here, but it does feel like even when you feel like you're finding stable ground at that position or everywhere else, essentially within the organization, there does seem to be a consistent surfacing of something that grabs your attention in a way that is atypical or that almost demands your attention. So it is. I understand that perspective, and it very much. You feel that probably on a day-to-day basis. And with this team, obviously, it's the quarterback. I wanted to start you here because we've talked about this probably a little bit, after practices or before practices. But I mentioned 2 weeks ago that I think one of the most interesting aspects of this quarterback competition, of the quarterback situation, is just kind of the fan psychology around it. And I said on the podcast that I totally understand why there is a massive chunk of this fan base that wants to believe in the idea of what a young quarterback could mean throughout every fall, and to enter the season knowing that you have somebody at that position with the potential and the ceiling that you see in Kansas City, that you see in Buffalo, that you had in New England forever.
Yep.
And so, I mean, for me, I wonder, does that psychology strike you as interesting, first and foremost? And how does the psychology this time compare to previous iterations with Ponder, with Teddy Bridgewater, if you can kind of like conceptualize that and go back a little bit in your past?
So I feel like each one takes its own form. And part of why I'm excited for this camp is to see this. Like the Vikings have been selling, it's a competition. And quite frankly, you know what? The amount of access that we get to the OTAs, which is very staggered, and then the mini camp, which is 3 consecutive days, but it's not a ton. They can say whatever they want. And it's hard to be like, you're lying. And like, you know, the reps were split. They truly were split. But training camp don't lie. Your eyes don't lie in training camp. It's not closed for the first, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. You see everything as far as the practices go. They can hide nothing. And so this one, like Ponder eventually he was always sort of disappointing, but he eventually just flamed out. It was a bad draft pick. Bridgewater, a terrible way to end it with his leg breaking on the practice field. In 2009, they convinced us, hey, it's going to be Tavares Jackson and Sage Rosenfels, and they're competing. And then after one of the worst practices I've ever seen in my life, and Brad Childress being in a shockingly good mood the next day or so, Brett Favre, hey, you know what? We're back from Mankato, and here's Brett Favre. So I think every one of these, it's like kids, when people say, who's your favorite kid? And you're like, well, they're all different. All my kids are different. I like them differently. I feel like every one of these takes its own form, which is why I'm so curious this time. Like, I can't compare it to something unless McCarthy just completely craps out, and then it becomes much more like Ponder. But Ponder, if you look, we forget now, he got an extended runway, much more so than what McCarthy has here. So I am just so interested to see what form this takes. And then, of course, what that says about O'Connell, who infamously now said a few years ago that teams fail young quarterbacks more than young QBs fail teams. But if the Vikings move on from McCarthy here, aren't they doing exactly that? So I can't really compare them because I feel like every one of them is different.
Yeah, no, and totally makes sense. This one, it's just been so interesting, and obviously my lack of history doing it, like it's I guess it's just hit me square in the face, just the level of passion. And again, that's where I tie it. I have to, in my own mind, to the psychology of the hope that the fans of this team who listen to this show, watch this show, listen to you guys' shows and watch you guys' shows, like the psychology of what they've coveted their entire lives. Like I almost think in some ways that the passion pours out in circumstances like these for players like this, right or wrong. That's just for me. That's kind of how I've conceptualized it, because there is very vivid, or you can feel, I'd say, just the passion every single day.
Oh, absolutely. And look, it's hard too, and this goes for fans and coaches and teams. You can say we want that young drafted top 10 pick, and that's great, and it's true. Everybody does. But then you get into patience, and fans aren't patient. Coaches aren't patient. Teams aren't patient. And so, like, the question is, there's a fighting chance if you turn McCarthy loose now, he'll be fine. We don't know. It's 10 starts. And so, this is where I come back to what's the patience like. And, of course, that starts in the building and with O'Connell, but it also filters down to fans who get very upset. And the other thing where it's a really dysfunctional relationship between quarterbacks, the team, and the fan base is, Alec, we are so used to a veteran quarterback being brought in to fix things.
Yeah.
Like our experience is not, the Vikings drafted this guy and then that guy and then this guy and then that guy. Our experience has been, if you look at it, and this sort of starts with, aside from Culpepper, Dennis Green, who brought in a bunch of veteran guys. Randall Cunningham. They had drafted Brad Johnson, but he was aging by the time he finally started. Jeff George replaces Cunningham. Brett Favre. So if you sort of look at the history of this franchise, a lot of it Kirk Cousins. A lot of it is riddled with, okay, we're going to throw money at the problem. We're going to get a veteran to stabilize. Kyler Murray's that guy now. So my question to the fan base would be, we all want the young quarterback who becomes a Pro Bowl player and ascends to a Super Bowl champion. But do you have the patience for that? Because there's no real history of that here for a fan base that's used to, you know what, screw it. We'll go get Kyler Murray. He'll be good enough, might make the playoffs. That's what the Vikings have traditionally done.
Yeah. And the other, sidebar with that is like, patience doesn't come with a guarantee. So you could be patient, and then in the end, and I think that's, those probabilities and how they play out definitely contributes to all of it. I really like what you said earlier about like training camp reveals. I mean, you see the entire practice. We watch it every day. There's the 7-on-7 periods, but then you get 11-on-11 with the live bullets flying, and you get everything, whether it's teammates' reactions, coaches' reactions. I mean, it is all on display. And someone asked me, I thought this was interesting earlier this week, like, how long do you think, it's fair for Kevin O'Connell to take this competition to where, you then maximize what's possible for the offense out of the gate? And you know just as well as I do, when you play the Packers right out of the gate, there's not a lot of time for, figuring it outedness on the fly. And so I thought it was a great question. I think it will open itself up to revisionist history one way or another, regardless of how Kevin O'Connell goes about it.
Yep.
I would have to think if by my answer was by joint practices August 20th against, the Baltimore Ravens, if you're not figured it out, I think you are really opening up the opportunity for criticism. But where does your mind go when you go through that subject? Quick word from a couple sponsors. First, our presenting sponsor, First Resource Bank, a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area run by phenomenal people. Played golf with Charlie the other day, got a beer with Aaron. Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson, Tim Siegley, they run the thing. They're Vikings fans and have built a pretty awesome community bank, here in the Twin Cities, where they're really a connector of a ton of businesses and corporations, and they're fans of this team. So how could you not support them? They've got an online banking platform. I went in the other day and got a cashier's check in about 7 seconds. So if you want a bank that makes things very easy for you, but also makes it, easy to meet people, have conversations, I can't say enough about First Resource Bank. This show is also sponsored by Pro MN Athletics. So a couple of years ago, three guys, Kurt, Graham, and Tanner being Tanner Morgan, former Gophers quarterback, they came together like, how can we lift the tide of youth football development here in Minnesota? And they've done that at an unbelievably high level. This summer, they've got a 7-on-7 league for kids 5th through 9th graders. I saw videos of a quarterback the other day on Instagram who looked like a stud. So if your kid plays football, wants to play football competitively in middle school and high school and in college, can't say enough about Pro MN. They've got academies throughout the winter. And you really learn from guys who played in college, who know the game, who care immensely about like skill development, technical development. So Pro MN, please check them out.
So they can put the pads on 5 days in?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, I mean, it's right at the beginning of August.
Because, it's my opinion that they've got 2 weeks tops. Because here's the thing. You are, this isn't the old days. There's no two-a-days. And you're restricted on your time on field and all of that good stuff. And True. So you're preparing. Training camp now is for preparing a quarterback. It's not for a competition. A competition, when I started in 2003, go for it. You could have a competition all day long. Seriously, man, you can't do that now. Here's the other thing, though. Here's the other fly in the ointment, though. And this is a special fly because it's a Vikings fly. Kyler Murray, and watching him in the practices that we saw, which were, no pads, pajama practices. But, and I'm not faulting him, but Kyler Murray's head was swimming because Kevin O'Connell's offense is incredibly complex. Now, we all know that Brian Flores loves to dial up what he's going to dial up in training camp practices. which O'Connell will say in the calm of now, it's great for our offense. But it's not always great. Like Kirk Cousins complained about it, and he wasn't, I'm not Kirk fan number one, but he wasn't necessarily wrong about that. So here's my question. Are you really going to give, at the start of training camp, Kyler, a day of reps, and then it's going to be McCarthy the next day with the ones? But Flores is going to be dialing up this and that, and so now he's got to deal with that. And I know that you're thinking, this is great. Then he's got to think fast. Well, yeah, but he's trying to absorb what he's being told to do offensively, much less deal with a blitz he didn't know was coming. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Flores does defensively. And then if they want Kyler to start against the Packers, and I mean, I'm not buying they don't have an idea of who's going to start against the Packers. I think they got like 2 weeks tops. Much beyond that, you are now, if Kyler is your starter, you are setting up a reason why he does not look prepared. And by the way, that is going to come back. That criticism is going to come back on O'Connell as much or more than Kyler.
Well, like last year, you think about the criticism of JJ barely played in the preseason game. So early in the season, it was, what if he played more? And obviously there's reasons for it. There's durability. All of that plays a role. But again, it does open up revisionist history with a very fair revisionist history of what ends up happening. I think, like your point, it's also valid in the sense that, Kyler Murray, I give them credit because had they made it really easy for him out of the gate through the spring, they could have done that. Then it would, validates their signing, it validates their opinion, all of that. But the area that I do wonder by addendum is, last year during training camp, you'll remember this vividly, Judd. Like the defense was so far ahead, and it was rave reviews about the defensive line, and Justin Jefferson wasn't involved, and so it never felt like the offense had any like confidence really, or like that they had any progressive feel to it. And so that's another, like I would imagine Kevin O'Connell this time around wants to infuse a level of belief with that entire unit that builds upon itself throughout training camp. And so, to be waffling at quarterback and to have guys struggling at quarterback that affects the feel and the vibe of the whole offense, that's another layer that, in my opinion, they're going to have to kind of sift through on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's why they don't have a ton of time. If you look at this, too, and I know the offense doesn't necessarily change a lot, but if you look at the type of quarterback McCarthy is and Murray is, the offensive line needs to know, like, whose cadence are we following? There's going to be differences between how they play, what they're I mean, Kyler's going to get, I think, in my opinion, more leeway to run the ball. Now, McCarthy might do it himself, but I don't think they're encouraging that. The wide receivers. I mean, Kyler and McCarthy throw very different balls. And, and quite frankly, if it's going to be McCarthy, he needs to work on what they talked about in OTAs. I think it was Jefferson talked about the fact that he was taking some off his fastball. Because part of the reason, so like there's just, I don't see how it's possible in this day and age to conduct a true competition, to like go in on day one and say, we're not sure yet. I think you're setting yourself up for failure. And at the end of the day, if Kevin O'Connell goes into Nolan Teasley's office and says, I honestly don't know, I think Teasley's going to be like, what are you talking about? You got to have an idea at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I expect them to, certainly. I think just listening to you talk, I'm like, Kyler's play oftentimes is scramble drill, which means he's flushed out of the pocket, and the receivers need to know and have feel and landmarks for that specific, type of play that ultimately probably will happen 5 to 10 plays a game. And so, like, there's just so many of these intricate little details that relate to the offense that and we'll talk about this towards the end of the podcast, that has to be good for Kevin O'Connell to maintain the confidence and the reputation that he's built over the course of 4 years, that you just feel like there's too much to settle to where you're probably right. Like my answer of August 20th joint practices, you start to get real dicey at that point if it goes that long.
Yep. And I think there's also, and it's sort of joked about, but in watching the practices in the springtime, it became clear what the issues are too. There is definitely a conversation about Kyler Murray's height, And it's not to joke about it. It's to say, you can tell what happens, okay? So, first of all, there are, and this is not surprising, but in Kyler's case, I think it's special. There were some passes where he is going to throw to a spot, and you can tell he can't see the spot. So, like, he's putting the pass where it's supposed to be. Now, that can be dangerous, but there were a few he completed. Sure. He completed them, and it's like, that was a nice pass. And, like, let's say Jefferson was exactly where he was supposed to be, and it looked good. But your scramble drill thing is partially, if it starts to break down and he can't see, I mean, Blake Brandel's a big freaking guy, and he's your center. So if he's upright, Kyler can't see over Blake at that point. So now if the play starts to break down, he probably has to scramble, if nothing else, to get his eyes, right? Because if it's a broken play, you got to get your eyes comfortably downfield. So I think there's just going to be a lot of things that are particular to Kyler if he's going to be your guy that everyone is going to have to get used to, including keeping plays alive potentially. And I don't see how you get to that point by giving him like first team reps on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and McCarthy first team reps on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday.
And you know that so much of the offense, the way you started there, is a rhythm and timing proposition and really is a trust proposition. And it becomes more difficult to probably have that innate trust the less amount of time you've had in terms of opportunities to trust the offense. So it's very interesting. I think one of the things that stood out to me in the spring, and it relates to the last portion of this that I wanted to talk through with you, was just like there were a handful probably of times where Kyler Murray, it was deep downfield, over the middle, 40 yards in the air, passes down the field, into double coverage, that hung up or that were inaccurate or that ultimately got picked off. And so one of the things I wondered for you was like in training camp, what do you have to see? What do you think you have to see early on to be like, maybe Kyler isn't the obvious choice here? And for me, it starts there of like careless over the middle deep balls that are into double coverage towards Ty Felton that are intercepted. That's where you'll see the reactions of the coaches and it'll probably be very revelatory. But for you, what is it that you feel like you have to see to then have your mind go there?
I think what I have to see is this. Has O'Connell morphed his offense at all towards a quarterback, or at least when Kyler's out there? Because quite frankly, if Kevin still tries to run what he considers to be his scheme, damn it, and he's going to run that scheme, I don't know what's going to work. I don't know what's going to work. I mean, I think you have to, and I'll use this word in a good way, exploit Kyler Murray's strengths, not highlight his weaknesses. And I mean, my complaint until, basically they finally did change things at the end of last year, I thought, with McCarthy. But my complaint in defense of McCarthy was, I don't know that there was ever we're going to come to you, kid. I always thought it was, this is how the offense runs. And they finally sort of went away from that. Now, with Frank Smith now being the assistant head coach, but basically the run game coordinator in some ways.
Yeah, he's the Hall of Fame run. Exactly. The way it's been billed is funny. But no, I do think Frank Smith is bringing ideas, not to cut you up.
No. But I was going to say, how's that going to look? Because I know that they ran the ball more as the season progressed, but I've never really felt, at least since Dalvin Cook left, that they've been serious about the run game too. And that becomes incredibly important. But if O'Connell turns Murray loose in his system and it's going to be what he wants, I don't know what's going to work. I really don't. I don't know he's a fit.
And I guess the question for me, I think to dovetail on what you said, I really haven't felt in the past few years, even though the run game by all statistical measures in 2025 was better than it had been, I've never felt like it is a phase of the team where the opposing defense is entering a game knowing, like, if we don't shut this down, we're in serious trouble. And by comparison, like you had the Seattle Seahawks last year, early in the season, they were running on a lot of teams. And so ultimately, you get base defense and that allows you to throw the football over the top. I don't feel like they've ever been able to dictate in that way. So I do think that's going to be a critical component of it. I guess my question is the adaptability going to be completely obvious to us? Or if it's like sprinkling in a couple more shotgun, are we going to notice that?
Or pistol?
Or do the results, is it going to kind of work backwards where if there's results, Kevin O'Connell's adapted. First, if they're like, I think that push and pull, it's going to be obviously incumbent upon us to be observant, but that part of it is interesting.
Well, and it's a little bit hard in training camp practices to tell for sure. I'll say this going in, and I've probably, because I've been bored, giving this entirely too much thought. For as much as they're talking about, and they, to your point, bring in Frank Smith, who's the run game guru. For as much as they've done there, the running back room seems really light to me. Aaron Jones is great in the locker room. He's a great guy. He's a pro's pro. He can show you how to be a pro, but the explosiveness is gone. And quite frankly, he's not a big guy and he's hurt a lot. Jordan Mason, in my opinion, has a role, and I like him, but it's a role, and we learned he can't catch a pass to save his life. And
pass protection too.
And pass protection. So you can't just turn him loose. And in the case of DeMont Claiborne, he's a 6th round pick. I'll believe he's going to play a lot when I see him play because, this coaching staff, all coaching staff, don't necessarily trust rookies. So, but my point is, like, if we're going to see what you're talking about, and it's not the statistical sheet, like it's not I know at the end of last year, they started, I believe, to run more, but if I'm not mistaken, guys were basically mocking, well, we had to dumb down the game plan. Well, that's not a commitment to the run. That's, I guess we have to do this because the kid can't play quarterback as well as we'd like, right? So I think it's going to be something that's going to play itself out, Alec, throughout the season. I don't think it's something that we're going to see in training camp necessarily and say, okay, that's it. I think it's something that's going to play itself out. And by the way, 5 games in is not playing itself out. Does that commitment, if things go wrong, do you keep with the commitment? Maintain it. Do you? Because my thing has always been this, and it's just a very simple thing. Does my opponent take play action seriously or laugh at me? Like when I go play action, does the linebacker, do I freeze him? Or does he be like, well, they're not going to run. Or if they do run, I'm not even worried about it.
And I've said this a lot on the podcast. Like when you have Justin Jefferson and you have Jordan Addison, defenses are going to have to play with a lot of bodies in the secondary, which should, underline, italicized, bold, should open up more space underneath if you're blocking effectively and you have running backs who can run the football and you're committed to it. And so, I feel like I've said this year by year, but if you can't prove it with this current personnel, then it's going to be really difficult to kind of believe over time. And it's interesting, I posted the survey that we do at The Athletic every year, and I asked, what is the thing that concerns you most outside of quarterback? And the run game was the answer from fans. And so they are astute and in tune to it. And I do think it is going to be a really probably key data point to how Kevin O'Connell is perceived. I was talking to somebody in the league the other day, and they're like, the OCs that I really respect right now are designing and putting a lot of time into the run game. And they mentioned Ben Johnson. Yep. They mentioned Mike McDaniel, who obviously people have a lot of opinions on, but I do think so much of the way defenses are trying to play is too high defenses, allocate a lot in coverage to take away explosive passes. So if you want to be efficient, you kind of have to run the football. And for you to mention the running back room, I think the offensive line and the trust that they have in Blake Brandel, these are layers of it that we will be evaluating, obviously, on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and O'Connell can't get to what he wants to through the pass game unless he has a run game. That's the thing, too. You just can't. Like the whole thing, the Vikings can complain till the cows come home about Justin Jefferson. He's always double covered. He's never open. But again, it's because the run game's no threat. It's easy to do that. Quite frankly, a tight end, preferably TJ Hawkinson, should have a huge season, an absolutely huge season. Are you trying to impress with your play calling or are you trying to be efficient? That's my question. And it feels like O'Connell at times is trying to impress. And it's really weird because now his guy, McVay, his mentor, he has now adapted into using 3 tight ends and basically using all of the run game and the personnel as a threat. And it's like, okay, are you going to come to that side? But this, it's funny. We pass judgment on the quarterbacks, and it's the most important position and highest priority position probably in all of sports. So it's not surprising. But there's so much more to it to set your quarterback up to be successful. And the poster child of this entire conversation for me is Sam Darnold's last 2 games here. Sam Darnold had a very nice season. There were some clunkers. I mean, that Jets game in London, the Jaguars game that they won was
Jaguars
unwatchable.
That game was brutal.
But what was the difference between the Sam Darnold, who, by the way, like in the Super Bowl, was not great, but he won the Super Bowl. The difference was this: Seattle had a run game. Seattle had other ways to win, and so all Sam had to do was manage the game. For anyone who says, well, the Vikings gave up a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Okay, that's true technically. Sam Darnold wouldn't have won one here. There's no way. He might have won a playoff game. But if you go back to, and this is the one that drives me nuts, do you remember the San Francisco playoff game that the Seahawks were in last year? And it was, I think it was Seattle's first possession, got to a 4th down. And Darnold threw a pass, and you could see him, hands around his throat. It was Detroit all over again. And Seattle's like, okay, that's cool. We'll just run.
Real quick, I want to give a shout out to Great Clips. A great haircut is always a mood booster, but it's even better when it's convenient too. That's why you'll love online check-in at Great Clips. You just check in from your phone and get a ready next text when you're up next. Plus, with the convenient hours at Great Clips salons, you can get a haircut even when you're really busy. So if your hair and your mood could use a boost, download the app today. Great Clips. It's going to be great. Also want to mention Aquarius Home Services, your independent authorized Connecticut dealer. It's summer, and that means it's home improvement season. At Aquarius, they know that managing a household and all of the expenses that come with it is no easy task. They also know how important having worry-free water in your home is. Your family, trust me, they do. They deserve water you can trust. You use water every day for drinking, cooking, cleaning, bathing. That's why they at Aquarius Home Services are excited to share their summer trade-in and trade-up program. You can trade in your old water softener and trade up to a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. I highly recommend it. You don't worry about contaminants or forever chemicals. You don't have to worry about hard water, rusty water, nitrates, lead, or arsenic. Aquarius Home Services, your independent authorized water systems dealer. Please check them out in the information in the link below.
And that was
Yeah. And I think like the other thing, if you want to be optimistic, there's one way to look at it where if you can create a run game that is dominant,
yes,
and then you bring defenders close to the line of scrimmage, now you have opportunities for Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison that you haven't had before. And then you can kind of play push-pull from that standpoint. So there's a multiplication effect, I think. And that's why, Nolan Teasley, the GM of the Vikings, who came from Seattle, who just observed what they did, in his opening press conference and in conversations is very open of like defensive run game makes everything easier at a position that is really hard to find the superhero that some teams throughout the league have. So the last thing for me in wanting to talk to you was like how big of a year just generally you think this is for Kevin O'Connell. And I personally thought the fans made it very clear in the survey. They think it's a big one. I think it's a huge data point, and if it goes really well and they do commit to the run game and Kyler Murray does have the season that many people who have spent time around him think he can have with this team, like he will be heralded for that. And if it goes poorly, I think there will be major criticism. But for me personally, I see this as a just very revealing year for Kevin O'Connell as a play caller, as a leader, and as the director of this organization that he's been now for multiple seasons.
I agree completely. I don't think his job, just to be clear here, I don't think as we sit here now, I think he is in no jeopardy. So I don't think he's on a hot seat. He helped pick Teasley. So it's not like Teasley is going to go to the Wilfs and say, we got the wrong guy. I think they're in this together. I also think the Teasley pick is a good pick because of all the things that you mentioned. So they would need to have a horrendous season for him to be fired. I don't see that. But I'm with you. I agree. This is a huge season. because now this is going to show where is he at as a play caller. It's funny, I've been pretty critical of his season of O'Connell last year as a play caller and as sort of the de facto OC. I thought he had a rough year. The McCarthy thing, good or bad, his choice completely or not, it was what it was, and he wouldn't adjust until it was too late. And then they did win some football games. But I also have been, praise might be too strong, I have been complimentary of Kevin because I never felt like he lost control of the team. Like as far as the overseer, the head coach, the guy that sort of sets the culture. That's a cliche word now, but I always felt he had that. Like I never sensed players were like, this guy has lost me or something, and we've covered teams like that. That's a different feeling. So I think what he needs to do is just have, and hopefully this is where Teasley helps out, Frank Smith helps out. Yeah. I think he just needs to come to grips with the fact that, hey, drop all the plays that you want and you can imagine them in your head, but you got to be more functional at the end of the day until you get that quarterback, until you get your Josh Allen. I mean, heck, perhaps Drake May, who he definitely wanted to get. So I don't think he's in trouble, but I do think this will be a very revealing season in his adaptability, which I felt we had an issue with last year. But again, I think the team returns on really good terms, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember after the Chargers loss mentioning tension, and a lot of people went crazy about it. For me, more than anything, it was tension above the locker room level on the third floor. I mean, that tension flowed, I think, and you could feel, I mean, you heard it, you could feel it. At that point, it was less about locker room frustrations. You're around, but I'm in there every day. Like you never felt like players were pointing fingers, any of that. And I do think a lot of that starts up top. And again, if Kevin O'Connell can have the play calling season that I think he believes he can have, and that, there's reason that people around the league think the Vikings can have, then the reputation and the narrative will be back on the mountaintop the way it was entering the Detroit game in 2024. Like, I think that's pretty clear cut. So it's going to be very telling in that regard. I'd ask you this and leave you here. Like, besides the quarterback, we walk out there for the first practice of training camp, got the full squad out there. Let's just say first full pads practice. Ooh. What else? I mean, it'll be quarterback, I promise.
Right.
You're gonna have the statistics on the Substack, and I'll be looking forward to fact checking my notes from that.
Well, reps is the most important thing now. Reps. This year's focus is just reps.
Yeah.
Who gets the reps?
What else besides quarterback is it like? That's the one thing I'm recording my short form video afterwards because I was interested in it.
Oh, edge rushers.
Okay.
I mean, that room is one person short, I think, at least.
Agree.
Turner, Van Ginkel. Here's the other question I have that's sort of inside baseball off of that too. Since we know more now than we did a year ago, and I know Jake Golday is going to work as an off-ball linebacker to start with, but who is working then behind Van Ginkel? Because we know, and Dallas Turner sort of got screwed, right? Because he took over when Van Ginkel got hurt early, and we didn't see much. And I called him out for it because he was an edge. But then we find out that's a very specific sort of
position.
Flores tricked up position, because then Turner gets a chance when Grenard goes down. It's like, oh, he looks fine here. So clearly you cannot just throw in anyone who's an edge to play the Van Ginkel position. And clearly you can't trust Van Ginkel not to get hurt. He gets hurt. He's not young. So is Golday the next guy up there then, just because he's got that length and size? And so the entire edge situation to me is really, really intriguing, because I think they're at least one guy short there. I think they've got three young guys in that room as well, but probably one or two of those guys sticks around as special teams guys as much as edge guys. So what do they do there? Who's playing there? And then as training camp progresses, do they address it by signing a veteran?
I think it also makes me think, like, when Andrew Van Ginkel was out last year with the concussion and neck injuries and they couldn't stop the run. I mean, how much of that is because you literally pulled the Jenga tower out from the I mean, like, the biggest and most important piece in Andrew Van Ginkel. And it is, I mean, I'm glad you went there because someone asked me about Jadeveon Clowney the other day. And I mean, I would not be surprised if at some point the Vikings are very aggressive in that market. Just don't think, when everyone's on break this summer is probably the optimal time. And then I've said on the podcast, it's going to be dependent on what type of role is a player like that looking for, because the Vikings don't immediately need somebody who is a starter, considering Dallas Turner is manning one spot and Andrew Van Ginkel is manning the other. So I think that's kind of TBD, but I'm glad you mentioned it because you're betting a lot there. And then you're also, I mean, on the defensive line overall, Jalen Redmond has been really your most reliable guy. You've seen some flashes from Levi Drake Rodriguez. Caleb Banks will have massive headlines in training camp. Dominique Orange. But, you're making a big bet on the interior. And then if you're not, deep on the edge, then you're asking potentially Brian Flores to patch it together in a way that he's done in past years.
You don't want to have to.
Probably you don't need to be doing that to then, especially if you want to make the playoffs and compete in the playoffs. It's just that you're asking too much there. So I think you're smart to mention it.
And Turner's going to go to a snap count he's never been at before. Like right. His snaps are going to go huge. And the other thing is, Caleb Banks is going to have the most famous foot at TCO, because if he hobbles off the field at any point, everyone is going to sound the alarm. I mean, that was a ballsy pick at 18, not because he's not good, but because he's a mammoth man who's had reoccurring foot problems. So that's another one. I think his ability just to stay on the practice field is huge, because if, guys that big that have foot problems more than once, it gets to be a real concern about, like, when does it stop? And there's no question he fell pretty hard based on that.
That's another one too, where, like, you show up one day I'm just thinking about training camp. Like, you show up one day and you're going through the roster, who's out there, who's not, and you don't see him out there, and then it's just like, I mean, it's August 5th and he's not out there.
Hobbles out in a walking boot. We've seen it before. Makes me nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. Judd, thanks for hopping on. It was really fun. I'm looking forward to being out there. I told one of my parents over today, I was like, this is the quiet time. It's supposed to be relaxing, but I really can't wait. And that's probably a sign of loving it. And I know you enjoy it too. So should be fun. Can't wait to be out there.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks, Judd. Talk soon. And that'll do it for episode 182 of the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate Judd Zulgad hopping on. Thank you guys for listening. As we mentioned at the top, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, you can rate, review, give us 5 stars, and we appreciate that. I mean, we are 3 weeks out from training camp, if not less, and I'm excited. I really am. I'm not lying about it. I'm refreshed. I'm ready to roll. Stories coming at The Athletic, so please stay tuned for that. And with that, have a great weekend. We will talk to you guys next week, and looking forward to it. Talk to you very, very soon.